The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to Aaron and say to him, when you set up the 7 lamps, they are to light the area in front of the lampstand." Aaron did so. He set up the lamps so that they faced forward on the lampstand, just as the Lord commanded Moses. This is how the lampstand was made. It was made of hammered gold from its base to its blossoms. The lampstand was made exactly like the pattern the Lord had shown Moses. The Lord said to Moses, "Take the Levites from among the other Israelites and make them ceremonially clean. To purify them, do this." Now we're going to read about, we've already read about the Levites being dedicated to special tasks. You had the priests, who were of the tribe of Levi, but the priests were specifically the male descendants of Aaron. Aaron himself was a son of Levi, descendant of Levi. And the priests were limited strictly to male descendants in his line. Everybody else that comes from the tribe of Levi, including Moses and his sons, were not priests and could never be priests. But the Levites had other duties that they were called to do in service for the tabernacle and to assist the priests, but only the sons of Aaron could be priests. And we read about those duties in Numbers 3 and 4. And again, remember, that material actually happened after this did. So this is taking place chronologically before that. The Lord said to Moses, "Take the Levites from among the other Israelites and make them ceremonially clean. To purify them, do this. Sprinkle the water of cleansing on them. Then have them shave their whole bodies and wash their clothes, and so purify themselves. Have them take a young bull with its grain offering of fine flour mixed with oil. Then you are to take a second young bull for a sin offering. Bring the Levites to the front of the tent of meeting and assemble the whole Israelite community. You are to bring the Levites before the Lord, and the Israelites are to lay their hands on them. Aaron is to present the Levites before the Lord as a wave offering from the Israelites, so they may be ready to do the work of the Lord. After the Levites lay their hands on the heads of the bulls, use the one for the sin offering to the Lord and the other for a burnt offering to make atonement for the Levites. Have the Levites, the sin offering, of course, atones for sin. The burnt offering stands for total dedication to God. Have the Levites stand in front of Aaron and his sons, and then present them as a wave offering to the Lord. In this way you are to set the Levites apart from other Israelites, and the Levites will be mine. After you have purified the Levites and presented them as a wave offering, they are to come to do their work at the tent of meeting. They are the Israelites who are to be given wholly to me. I have taken them as my own in place of the firstborn, the first male offspring from every Israelite woman. Every firstborn male in Israel, whether man or animal, is mine. When I struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, I set them apart for myself. And I have taken the Levites in place of all the firstborn sons in Israel. Of all the Israelites, I have given the Levites as gifts to Aaron and his sons to do the work of the tent of meeting on behalf of the Israelites and to make atonement for them, so that no plague will strike the Israelites when they go near the sanctuary. So they intercede for the people, on behalf of the people in front of God, to prevent the people from approaching God carelessly or recklessly. Because impure people cannot be around a pure God without consequences. An unholy, unclean people cannot be in the presence of a holy, clean God without consequences. So to make the people clean, there has to be a go-between, a mediator. Now the problem, of course, of the system is that the mediators themselves were not clean. They had to make atonement for themselves and clean themselves first and foremost, and then they could do their business of mediating between God and the rest of the people. So the system itself is inherently flawed and will come up short. It will not be able to take away sin. It will not be able to deal with the sin problem because the mediators themselves are sinners. But that is what they are to do. Moses, Aaron, and the whole Israelite community did with the Levites just as the Lord commanded Moses. The Levites purified themselves and washed their clothes. Then Aaron presented them as a wave offering before the Lord and made atonement for them to purify them. After that, the Levites came to do their work at the tent of meeting under the supervision of Aaron and his sons. We read about that in Numbers 3 and 4. They did with the Levites just as the Lord commanded Moses. The Lord said to Moses, "This applies to the Levites. Men 25 years old or more shall come to take part in the work at the tent of meeting." Now, in the previous chapters, we read that it was 30 years. Let's see if we can find that. Chapter 4, verse 1 says, "Count on the men from 30 to 50. Here it's 25 to 30. That 5-year gap, there's two potential explanations for that. Either this was written first, and they raised the limit from 25 to 30 in the month or whatever, or 25 you were entering a training period of time and you became a full worker at age 30. Not really sure. But at the age of 50, they must retire from their regular service and work no longer. They may assist their brothers in performing their duties at the tent of meeting, but they themselves must not do the work. This, then, is how you are to assign the responsibilities of the Levites. Now, I want to say something here before we go on. I've been looking kind of for an opportunity to talk about this, and I'm going to go ahead and do it here. This will be this will be a good chance to do it. I want to, so anyway. So the firstborn, the consecration, the setting apart, the taking of the firstborn. All right, so the price for Israel's freedom from Egypt was the deaths of all the firstborn of Egypt. The deaths of all the firstborn man and animal in Egypt. So the ransom price for that, so that was the price of their freedom. And so the ransom price for that price was the firstborn of Israel. Because God struck down the firstborn of Egypt, he was taking the firstborn of Israel in payment of that. So Israel's ransom price from Egyptian slavery was the firstborn of Egypt, and then their price for the deaths of those firstborn were the firstborn of Israel. The Lord took them claimed them as himself. But he's taking the Levites now in exchange for all the rest of the firstborn. This is a little weird to our understanding. We have the idea of a firstborn son in our culture, but it's not anywhere near as pronounced here as it was here. One thing to consider is that it was very common. Okay, first of all, the firstborn was more of a title than. Okay, so yes, your firstborn son is to some degree literally the first son that was born to you as a father. Okay, that's there's always going to be a preference there for that first son that you have, because you don't know how many you're going to get. You really don't know if you're going to get any. And so when you get that first one, that's a big deal. And so your inclination as a father in this culture, as a patriarch, would be to make that firstborn son your chosen one, because who knows how many more you may have. Joseph ended up having 12. It's who knows how many. Abraham had a bunch of sons with other women, but he only had one with Sarah. Isaac had 2. So you don't know how many you're going to get. You could have 1, you could have 2, you could have 12. So your preference will be to bless the first one, literally your firstborn son. But it doesn't always have to be. We saw in Genesis over and over and over and over again that the firstborn son, the one who actually literally came out first, was often not the one that ended up being blessed, or ended up being the chosen one to carry on the line, or the blessing, or the birthright, or anything like that. That was frequently not. In fact, I think only in one instance with Judah's sons by Tamar, it was, in fact, the first one that came out. And even there was a little bit of stipulation with the guy with the baby sticking his hand out and then putting it back or whatever. So it's Abel was not the firstborn son of Adam and Eve. Of course, he himself was killed then and replaced by Seth, who certainly wasn't the firstborn son. Shem was probably not the firstborn of Noah. There's a little bit of confusion about the way the order, the language and some, but I think Japheth was probably the firstborn. Abraham's firstborn son technically was Ishmael, although he only was supposed to have a son with Sarah, and that only being Isaac. Isaac's firstborn son, of course, was Esau, and Jacob got the blessing and the birthright. Jacob had 12 sons. Joseph ends up being like the main one of the 12, and he's number 11. And then the one who actually becomes like the chosen one is Judah, and he's number 4. Even with Joseph, Jacob ended up blessing his younger son over the older one. And Moses is younger than Aaron. So consistently all through now, it's not actually been the literal firstborn, the one first in the birth order, who is like the chosen one. So it's more. So it is a concept, yes, somewhat reflective in actual birth order, but it's also a title. It's also like a position. You get the preference, of course, would be for your actual firstborn son, Reuben, in the case of Jacob, for example, to be the firstborn. You want him to get the blessing, but whoever gets the blessing then becomes the firstborn. It doesn't necessarily have to be the oldest one. Although, again, that would be your preference. As a father in that culture, as a patriarch in that culture, your preference would be to your firstborn, your actual literal firstborn. But in the end, it's a title. It's a privilege. It's a role that's conferred upon you. And a lot of times, and I'm not sure if this was true in Israel. It may have been, but a lot of times the firstborn had special duties for the. This was a patriarchal age. It's down. Patriarchal age is now giving way to the Mosaical age here in Israel, at least. But up until now, the leaders have been the patriarchs of the families, the heads of the household, basically. And there was a concept in this culture that the firstborn, whether it was literally your firstborn child, son, or a title, someone, one of your sons that you said, this is my chosen one, my firstborn. That person, that one, usually before he became the patriarch of his own clan, would get preferential treatment when it came to conducting the religious services or doing the religious duties of the family, offering the sacrifices, for example, on behalf of the family, or on behalf of the father, or when you lay your father to rest, or your ancestors to rest. It's like you're the one who's praying for them, praying for the dead, burying the father. That's a special duty of the firstborn. I'm not sure how widespread that was in Israelite culture. They were living in Egypt for a couple hundred years. They had in fact become Egyptianized, so some of that may have bled off. And I'm not sure exactly, but there is this concept in this culture at this time of the firstborn son, whether literally the first natural born boy or another son, someone who came out later, the father eventually chooses to make entitled with the privileges of the firstborn, whichever it may be. There is this concept of the firstborn son having like a special privilege or a special rank and special roles and responsibilities in the family religiously, pertaining to religious matters, which is not being taken away from them. Okay, so like this consecrating of the firstborn of Israel and kind of transferring that to the Levites and saying, I'm taking the Levites in exchange for all the firstborn sons of Israel. It's like now the Levites are going to carry on those duties, and the firstborn sons of the other tribes of Israel are not. This could create some friction. Now, I don't know if we have really any record of that. We'll see a record of some friction within the clan of Levi itself. And there's going to be a little bit of a hint of it with the descendants of Reuben kind of getting involved in that. And Reuben was the actual firstborn son of Jacob. So the text doesn't actually specifically say this, but there may be a link between these things. I'll talk about that when I get there in a few chapters. But so the Levites are now being consecrated in replacement of, or in place of, the firstborn sons of the rest of Israel. So they're going to have all these special duties. The priests, of course, are in the tribe of Levi, or they're even consecrated from the rest of the Levites. And then the Levites are going to have the special duties around the tabernacle, and part of their duties are to guard that area, keep that area safe and separate, and keep the rest of the Israelites from intruding on it unlawfully so they don't get destroyed. And these people are going to be doing that now instead of the rest of the firstborn sons of Israel. So that is where a lot of this consecrate the firstborn to me concept comes from. It was a ransom price of their freedom in Egypt. There was the death of the Egyptian firstborns. God is taking the lives of the firstborn Israelites in place of that, and then he's taking the Levites in place of that. So there is an idea of redemption here, the buying back of something, kind of going on here. But I also wanted to explain some of the cultural context so we understand why the duties of the firstborn that they would have in their families are now being taken from them and put into the Levites to serve as the representatives of Israel as a whole.